So in the previous panel I mentioned I'm the investment director on this project, I didn't say where, in East Africa, in Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda, and it's called Spring. And the idea is to start way earlier, to really say, if we don't catch girls by the time they're 13, 14, we've kind of lost them. And so we're starting at 10. So our target audience is 10 to 19, and we're in the business of accelerating businesses to help girls learn, to help them earn, to help them save, to help them be protected or protect themselves. And when it comes to education, we've been doing a lot of research about what are the barriers for girls in urban areas, in rural areas, in peri-urban areas. The number one thing is poverty. It's whatever you might imagine, the number one thing is poverty. Poverty of the family not being able to afford to send their girl to school. And when we were talking before, the number one reason about radicalization is so much about poverty. It's access to opportunities. And so we're really thinking about, you know, if we can catch girls young, if they're in school, how do we get them to be able to stay in school longer? How do we create that economic opportunity? If they're out of school because they've been in early marriage, or they've had early pregnancy, or they've been stigmatized because of violence, then how do we get them access to education and training in an out-of-school environment? How do we use mobile education? How do we use new technology combined with old technology to really change the dynamic? And so I think whether we're coming from a place of higher ed or really starting young, I mean, so much of this comes back to poverty. How do we tackle those issues around creating economic opportunity and then really starting younger?
The challenge for higher education in the US at least is that we used to be the case that folks would just drop off their kids when they were 18 years old and pick them up when they were 22, and that was all right. And I think we've all learned that we now have to reach back into folks' lives as early as you just said, back to elementary school, and help them to even imagine a pathway to college. And Yousef and I were having the same conversation about the fact that at least in our neighborhood, where we have a lot of Somali young men who are in fact in jeopardy of radicalization, it often is because that clear pathway forward to school or to a job wasn't there. And so how do we offer those very concrete ways that we're reaching into that community and offering those means by which they can imagine a path on to, and a fascinating story from our councilman in our neighborhood is the first Somali American ever elected to public office in the US. And he's now serving, and so he comes and talked to us. He said, the Somalis, we really want to work, and in fact, it just takes one. And he talked about a fellow who learned about how but he could actually buy a truck and become a truck driver. And he said within 6 months, 200 other Somalis were now driving trucks because that was what happened in that community, and that created that pathway to opportunity and to a job that they never would have imagined that they could take on.
So. How young do you start?
We start at elementary school with talking about what is radicalization. And I remember myself, I saw a movie in 6th grade, I think. It was called The Wave. It was about a teacher doing an experiment with his students. And it was about the Second World War, where he wanted to explain to them how so many Germans could join the Nazi movement without like supporting it fully. And the kids thought that Germans were stupid. How could they do that? How could they be so stupid? And during this experiment, the same thing happens to them, because he's playing on the human emotions and the needs to belong. And I said the same thing as the students. I said, oh my God, they're stupid. How can they do it twice? How can they be tricked twice? And the same thing happened to me. So we are actually talking to the students about how it could happen to anyone. I mean, you can sit there now and say, it can never happen to me, but that's not true. If you are in the right place and you are vulnerable enough, of course it can happen to you. So it's all about putting them in the shoes of others, because it's so easy to look at the extremists as monsters, at least when we read about them in the media. But if you see the whole person, you see what's underneath, and you see that there are a lot of resources here. I mean, they are really going all in this ideology and in this movement. And what if they went all in something constructive and positive instead? So it's all about using these resources that's there and direct them elsewhere. So I mean, it's important for the students to understand that it's all about human mechanics. It's how we work. So we start early, and we work mostly with the higher classes, but I mean, we start all down to 5th grade right now.
So when you talked about seeing people's talents, our angel group is looking at a company that is starting social enterprises with people who are ex-gang members and ex-offenders. And what the woman who started this organization says is, you know, these kids have a lot of skills. They're really good salespeople. They know how to manage money. They're entrepreneurial. It's just about maybe reshifting and recognizing that talent and those skills and saying, you know, creatively, what can we do with that? And it's remarkable when you meet these young people who are really, redirecting.
Do you have any, Yousef, lessons learned from, I think it's so interesting how you kind of were in one social structure, you moved into another, and you've kind of come back to a different, come back to the original one, but with different ties. And just if you have thoughts about things that you've learned or things you've observed kind of coming back and forth, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, actually I got a good question last night at the school. There was this student asking me, do you have any regrets? And I instantly said, yes, of course I regret joining this movement and I regret all of this. And then I thought about it for about a minute, and I said, no, wait, actually I don't, because I can use this experience to help others. And I couldn't do that job I do today if I didn't have that experience. So I think it's more about, instead of having regrets for things you've done in your life, learn from it and use it to help others. So that was probably the most important question I have been getting for a long time. And I mean, my story is a little bit different because I had a really stable family, a really stable environment, and then I got into a life crisis, I joined the radical movement, and then I went out and got the same security. I mean, a lot of the youth we are working with, they have never felt that security, they've never had a secure life. All their life have been a struggle, and they have always been afraid to go home, afraid to go to school. I mean, it's a little bit different for them, but it's all about creating that platform that they can feel secure and safe. And we feel that we have good, good results on that, because most others who have tried to work with this youth, they have failed. And because we can relate to them in a little bit different way, they listen to us and they really want to change their lives. So we think this works quite well.
Great. Are there any questions that have been collected? Okay, great. So one thing I was noticing as we're talking about what is this eclectic group of people? What do we have in common? And I think one thing is just, this theme is the power of the individual, and yet the three of you are very deeply embedded in networks of different kinds, which I think is just really very interesting, right? How it's very hard to do anything on your own. And I don't know if anyone wants to talk at all about their life as part of a network or particular networks.
I have an idea. And for us, it's really important that these youths can get work. And when you have like a CV and it says that you have fallen out of school early, never worked a day in your life, you have been in jail for like 8 years, and now you're a radical extremist, it's not usually the first person you hire. So it's always a struggle to find jobs, and it's all about finding the businesses who see this as their role in society. They can actually change the life of someone. So I think it's important that we can talk more about that. And actually, here in Norway, in a short while, we're going to have a conference with a lot of big businesses here to see how we can take this a step forward. How can we have like free jobs ready for them when we get a new case? How can we say you can work here if that's something that you feel like doing? So I think that's really important for the whole society. I mean, we can't change this alone. We need help from both education, schools, the government, and also local businesses, because they really want to work. They don't want to lay on the couch and be lazy. It's not them. They are really resources, and I think people need to see that.
I work for the most arcane of all institutions, the academy, where everything is siloed and the like, and so it's a particular, I think, cultural shift for colleges and universities to think about how, I usually actually use the concept of, are you open to evolving social arrangements? That's the way I talk about it, because I think of the fluidity of the boundaries, that the power of just being, even at this conference, thinking about partnership for change. It's the only way that we're going to create change, is to enter into alliances and networks and relationships that in fact perhaps force us to compromise, force us to think differently about power and governance and all the things that Suzanne pointed to earlier, which is the great thing about being in on the front end. But I'm inheriting an institution that has a 1,000-year history, and so creating that change becomes a really important part and modeling that change again for students, giving them the skills to go out and navigate those networks, be able to make the kind of connections that Yousef talked is really, I think, a powerful part of what our education has to offer us.
I am part of a lot of networks. I totally believe in that as a vehicle for making change. And so I'm on the board of a network of philanthropists that are in the US, foundations and individual philanthropists called Confluence Philanthropy, where some of them are representing 200-year-old, 300-year-old families, some of them are New Wealth, all trying to figure out how do they align their investments with their mission. I have obviously this network that I started called Clearly Social Angels. I'm lucky enough to be part of Tonic and this group that is connected to Tonic, the 100% Impact Network. And that's a network, it's probably the newest network that I've joined, that is about those of us that are trying to move 100% of our portfolios across every asset class towards mission, towards impact. And some things will be higher impact, some things will be more really about ESG. But really to do that in community, I think there are about, Sophie, 80 of us now? It's globally. To be able to sit with somebody and say, I'm really having a hard time figuring this part out. I'm really looking for something that is about investing in women and girls or investing in water. What are you looking at? It's amazing when you get that collective together to really help you do that. And I'm starting a new network now called the Women Effect, which is about investing with a gender lens. And it's, again, a global network it's more of a community of practice to really say, if we want to invest with a positive effect on women and girls, and we want to bring more women as impact investors, but also men and women who want to have a positive effect on women and girls, how can we do that together and with all the diversity of what we might care about? So it could be women and environment, women and human rights, women and health, to find each other and to be able to say, can you find some pipeline of companies that are around slavery and trafficking? Can you find some companies that are around child and maternal health? And to find other people who are seeking that as well. That not only helps us, but then it also helps all those entrepreneurs and those funds and those people creating product to then help find us. And where we can be in partnership with them to say, gee, these are the problems we want to solve. How can we do that better?
Great. So I think we're at time, and thank you so much for joining this session. Thank you.